Welcome, listeners, to a story brimming with raw emotions and delicate secrets. Tonight, we delve into the life of a young wife alone. Blair, a captivating young woman, grapples with loneliness while her husband, William, is away on business. The absence of his affection and her own unspoken desires leave her restless and conflicted. Enter Britney, a daring and alluring friend who awakens within Blair a thirst for new and tempting experiences. Secret rendezvous are proposed as a way for Blair to explore her hidden longings. Powerful emotions and unforgettable moments begin to consume her. As Blair stands at a crossroads between loyalty and passion, where will her path lead? Join us as we unravel the secrets and hidden desires in this captivating tale. Blair finished tidying up and wrapped up her work for the day. Glancing at the calendar hanging on the wall, she sighed. It was Friday, May 15th. William, her husband, had been away on a business trip in Germany for over 6 months now. Boredom gnawed at her. What to do this weekend to chase away the blues? She wondered. Probably just another grocery run, a quick visit to some friends, and then dropping Aiden off at her in-laws. It was the same routine every week, and Blair was starting to feel suffocated by the monotony. Back when William was home, weekends were always filled with fun and laughter. He doted on her and always made sure she had a good time, planning outings and adventures for the whole family. Now, he was miles away, pursuing his master's degree in Germany. While she was incredibly proud of him, she couldn't deny the gaping hole his absence had left in her life. She had grown so used to his presence, his constant care and attention. To be fair, Blair considered herself lucky. They were a successful young couple. William worked for an accounting firm in Germany, and Blair had a comfortable government job in Washington. Her work was undemanding, something she did for enjoyment rather than out of necessity. Financially, they were more than stable, giving them the freedom to live comfortably. In the eyes of her friends and former classmates from the University of Washington, Blair had it all. They envied her seemingly perfect life and picture-perfect marriage. They truly were a striking pair. William, with his fair skin and a pair of knowledge glasses, had an intelligent air about him. Blair, on the other hand, possessed a classic Washingtonian beauty. Tall and slender, with a graceful figure that belied her age, she turned heads wherever she went. Her elegant features, highlighted by a perfectly sculpted nose and naturally rosy lips, were accentuated by a captivating smile that revealed a set of pearly white teeth. Her long, straight hair, cascading down her shoulders with a few subtle highlighted streaks, framed her face beautifully. Even at nearly 30 and a mother, she still had the physique of a much younger woman. Her slim waist and long legs, always adorned in stylish clothing, drew admiring glances from men wherever she went. Few would have guessed that she was already a mother to a 6-year-old son. Perhaps the only flaw in her otherwise flawless appearance, according to some, were her full lips and the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, giving her a flirtatious air. Despite this, Blair was a woman of strong morals and unwavering loyalty. It wasn't as if she hadn't been tempted before. Even when William was around, she received her fair share of admiring glances and propositions. However, the thought of infidelity had never crossed her mind. She shuddered at the thought of jeopardizing her marriage and the respect of her colleagues, many of whom knew William personally. The potential scandal was not worth the risk. Truth be told, ever since William had left, Blair felt like something was missing. An undeniable, primal urge simmered beneath the surface, a constant reminder of her youth and vitality. Many nights, she'd drift off to sleep, dreaming of intimate moments with her husband, only to wake in the middle of the night with a flushed face, a racing heart, and a distinct dampness between her legs. The unfulfilled longing was becoming unbearable, a constant source of guilt and frustration. While a part of her craved release, Blair wasn't one to act impulsively. The idea of an affair filled her with apprehension. It was too risky, too complicated. Everyone knew her, knew William. Word would inevitably get back to him, and the thought of the ensuing chaos and heartbreak was too much to bear. Yet, there were nights when the desire for physical intimacy left her tossing and turning, wishing for someone, anyone, to appear and satisfy her needs, only to vanish without a trace by morning. It was during this time that her friendship with Britney took on a new dimension. They had been close since high school, their bond strengthening through their university years at the University of Washington. They were two peas in a pod, sharing a similar sense of humor and zest for life. Britney came from a well-off family who had happily financed her master's degree in France. After 2 years abroad, she returned to Washington and landed a job at a prestigious multinational company conveniently located in the same office building as Blair. Their renewed proximity allowed them to reconnect regularly. While Blair was now a wife and a mother, Britney remained a carefree soul, enjoying the single life to the fullest. She was undeniably beautiful, tall like Blair but with a more delicate frame. What she lacked in curves, she made up for in style and sophistication. Designer clothes, expensive perfume, perfectly styled blonde hair, and a flashy car were all part of her carefully crafted image. Men flocked to her, but Britney seemed in no hurry to settle down. "Marriage can wait," she'd often tell Blair. "We're only young once. I plan on enjoying every minute of it. There's plenty of time for husbands and babies later." And she wasn't just saying it. Britney had a string of eligible suitors, all smitten with her charm, waiting in the wings. One in particular, a kind and successful young man whose family adored Britney, seemed ready to put a ring on her finger at a moment's notice. Most people saw Britney as a stylish socialite, a bit flamboyant perhaps, but ultimately a good girl. Only Blair, her closest confidant, knew the depths of her friend's wild side. Britney's tales of casual flings and daring escapades often left Blair blushing, secretly envious of her friend's carefree attitude towards relationships. As much as Blair admired Britney's free spirit, she couldn't imagine living life so boldly, so uninhibited. Britney, however, had mastered the art of discretion. She knew how to keep her affairs under wraps, especially from those she considered potential husband material. Her soon-to-be fiancé and his family remained blissfully unaware of her true nature, believing her to be the epitome of innocence and grace. Britney had confided in Blair, "It's just a bit of fun. Why be tied down to one man for your entire life? Where's the excitement in that?" As close friends often do, Blair eventually confessed her own struggles with William's prolonged absence. To her surprise, Britney's reaction was one of amusement. "Why on earth would you put yourself through that? It's a basic human need, Blair. It doesn't have to mean anything more than physical release. As long as you still love your husband, as long as your feelings for him don't change, what's the harm? Just say the word, and I can set you up with someone discreet." At first, Blair had just blushed and laughed at her friend's suggestions. But Britney was persistent, and slowly, Blair began to entertain the idea. Her friend's arguments, as outrageous as they seemed, started to make a strange sort of sense. One evening, after Blair confessed she was feeling particularly lonely, Britney lent her a stack of Japanese adult films. The films, with their exotic actresses and sensual scenes, left Blair breathless. Where did Britney even get these? As uncomfortable as she felt watching them, Blair couldn't deny the spark of arousal they ignited within her. The men in the films seemed almost unreal. Were all men like that? She wondered, her mind drifting back to William. She had never imagined such acts. Her own experiences with intimacy had been rather traditional. There was something captivating, almost hypnotic, about the actresses, their willingness to participate in such explicit acts. Later that week, as Blair finished organizing her files, she locked her office door and headed for the elevator. Britney was already inside, heading out for an afternoon of shopping. Blair called her in-laws, asking them to pick up Aiden from school, and then joined Britney for a trip to Safeway. Afterwards, they stopped for coffee at a nearby Starbucks. Inevitably, the conversation turned to William's extended absence. Britney, her eyes sparkling mischievously, leaned in close. "So, how are you holding up? Still able to handle it on your own?" She'd often tease Blair like this, half joking, half serious. But this time, Blair's frustration boiled over. "Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can take it," she confessed, her cheeks flushing crimson. Britney laughed, a knowing look in her eyes. "That's what I thought. Don't worry, I have just the thing." Lowering her voice, she continued, "How do you feel about a younger guy? I know someone perfect, a total newbie. He's a freshman at the University of Washington, completely innocent, adorable, and absolutely gorgeous." Blair was speechless, taken aback by her friend's bluntness. Britney cut her off with a sly grin. Don't worry, he's not completely inexperienced. I mean, I've introduced him to a few things. She winked. But he's young, totally clueless about relationships, and incredibly eager to please. Trust me, he's incredibly well endowed for his age. Britney whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. And he's clean, healthy, discreet. Guaranteed to keep his mouth shut, not that anyone would believe him anyway. She gave Blair's arm a reassuring squeeze. Just try it, you won't regret it. Blair was floored. Her mind raced, a blush creeping up her neck to her cheeks. Oh my God, Britney. He's just a kid, and he's still in school. I can't even imagine. Britney, her eyes twinkling with mischief, just laughed. Honey, relax. The younger they are, the more fun they are. And besides, no one would ever suspect a thing. It's not like we're talking about a relationship here. Just a bit of fun. Age is just a number, right? All men are the same in the end. Just trust me on this one. You'll thank me later. Blair sat there, speechless, as a wave of unfamiliar, daring thoughts washed over her. What had started as a joke now seemed like a tangible possibility. All she had to do was say yes. And Britney could be trusted to be discreet, she always was. Still, the thought of being with someone so young made her uneasy. But then again, Britney had a point. It was just a physical need. It wasn't as if she was looking for love or anything complicated like that. Getting involved with a married man would be messy, but this could be so simple. Seeing her hesitation, Britney gave her a playful nudge. Come on, Blair, live a little. We only get one life. Why not enjoy it? Don't let these stuffy social rules keep you from having a good time. It's not like you're falling in love with him. As long as no one knows, it doesn't affect your marriage, right? Just be discreet, and no one gets hurt. Think of it as self-care. She went on to describe the young man's virtues. He's a sweetheart, really. An only child, raised with strict morals. All he cares about is his studies. Totally clueless about women. Honestly, until he met me, he'd never even. Britney's voice trailed off, leaving the rest unspoken, but Blair could easily fill in the blanks. Blair, finally succumbing to her desires, gave a hesitant nod. That's the spirit. Britney exclaimed, a triumphant glint in her eyes. Just try it once, and if you don't like it, no harm done, right? Your secret is safe with me. Let me see. No time to waste. I'll get in touch with the boy and set something up. We'll just need to figure out the when and where, and I'll take care of the rest. So, what are you thinking? Your place? His place? A motel? Or I can even let you borrow my apartment. Blair bit her lip, weighing her options. A motel is out of the question. She finally whispered, her cheeks burning. Too risky. Someone might see us. And I don't want to impose on you. My place is fine, I guess. As for when, well, weekends are better, obviously. Weeknights are crazy with Aiden. I have to pick him up from school, feed him, get him bathed and ready for bed. Britney nodded thoughtfully. Okay, how about this Sunday? I'll talk to him tomorrow, to make sure he's free. It'll be perfect. They chatted for a while longer, finalizing their plan, before Blair finally said her goodbyes and headed home, a jumble of nerves and anticipation bubbling inside her. For the rest of Friday evening and all day Saturday, Blair couldn't focus on anything else. Her thoughts kept circling back to the plan she'd set in motion, a mix of curiosity and desire warring within her. Rational dictated she should call Britney, call the whole thing off. Tell her it was a crazy idea, a joke that had gone too far. But something held her back. On Saturday afternoon, while Blair was at William's parents' house with Aiden, Britney called. Okay, it's all set, she announced cheerfully. Ryan is all yours for Sunday afternoon. In fact, we're grabbing a coffee at that Starbucks on the avenue right now. Why don't you swing by? You can meet him, get acquainted. Blair, unable to suppress her curiosity, agreed instantly. She mumbled a quick excuse to William's parents about needing to run a quick errand and promised to be back soon. It only took her 10 minutes to drive from their house to the coffee shop. As she stepped inside, she spotted Britney immediately, seated with a young man in a corner booth. His back was turned, so Blair could only make out his build, lean and athletic. He wore jeans and a simple t-shirt that accentuated his fit physique. Britney stood up as Blair approached. "Wow, you're fast. I thought for sure you'd be running late, as usual. Anyway, come here, let me introduce you to," she chirped, gesturing towards the young man, who stood up awkwardly, his cheeks already turning pink. "Ryan, this is Blair, the friend I told you about." "Blair, this is Ryan. Play nice, you too." Ryan stammered a shy hello, Blair, barely making eye contact. "Hi, Ryan," Blair replied, equally flustered. Britney burst out laughing. "Oh, you too. No need to be so formal. Just call him Ryan. Geez, you'd think I'd set you up on a blind date or something. Relax." She plopped back down into her seat. Blair stole a curious glance at the young man as he sat there, his eyes fixed on the table, clearly uncomfortable. He really was quite handsome, bright eyes, a straight nose, clean-cut dark hair, and a sharp jawline. He looked so young, barely out of high school, with a charmingly innocent air about him. He wasn't as tall as Blair, but his physique was lean and athletic. Blair felt a pang of guilt. What was she even doing here? This was crazy. The boy was practically a child. How could she even think about? Britney, sensing their mutual discomfort, jumped in to fill the awkward silence, chatting about inconsequential things. Then, with a final wink, she announced, "All right, my work here is done. You two have fun getting to know each other. I'll leave you to it. Bye." With Britney gone, Blair tried her best to act natural, striking up a conversation with Ryan. They stuck to safe, impersonal topics at first: his classes at the university, her job, the unpredictable Washington weather, recent movies. Gradually, the initial awkwardness began to dissipate. Ryan, while still a bit shy, warmed up to Blair. He was surprisingly intelligent and articulate for his age, and they found themselves laughing easily together. Blair ended up spending several hours at the coffee shop with him that afternoon. As the day wore on and it was time to leave, they finally addressed the elephant in the room. Ryan, blushing furiously, stammered, "So, about tomorrow. What time would you want me to come over?" Blair's heart pounded in her chest. A wave of guilt washed over her, so strong she almost told him to forget it, that it was all a silly joke. But the thrill of the forbidden, the sheer audacity of it all, outweighed her reservations. 3 o'clock. Blair heard herself say, her voice barely a whisper. She quickly rattled off her address and then, gathering her things, made a hasty retreat, afraid she'd change her mind if she stayed a moment longer. The rest of the day and well into the evening, Blair was a jumble of conflicting emotions. Her mind raced, replaying the encounter with Ryan over and over. Had she made a terrible mistake? Was she a horrible person for even considering this? Yet, beneath the guilt and anxiety, a powerful undercurrent of anticipation and longing pulsed within her. Sleep was a long time coming that night. Blair's dreams were a confusing mix of William and Ryan, their faces blending together in a haze of desire and guilt. She woke abruptly in the middle of the night, clutching her pillow tightly, her body damp with perspiration. The insistent ache between her legs was impossible to ignore. She stumbled out of bed and went to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of cold water, willing her heart rate to slow. "Just this once," she whispered to herself as she crawled back into bed. "Just to see what it's like. I can't keep living like this." A pang of guilt stabbed at her. "Forgive me, William," she whispered into the darkness. The next morning, as Blair was tidying up the house, a sudden thought struck her. She quickly called Britney. "There's something I forgot to ask you. Is he safe, health-wise?" Britney's response was a dismissive laugh. "Oh, Blair, relax. I'm not irresponsible. Of course, I made sure. I had him tested before he's clean. Don't worry so much." Blair blushed and quickly ended the call. After lunch, Blair woke Aiden from his nap and took him to her in-laws. "I need to work this afternoon," she lied, her voice cracking slightly. She'd never been good at deception, and her cheeks flushed with guilt. Thankfully, her in-laws didn't seem to notice her unease. On her way home, Blair made a quick stop at the pharmacy. Back at the house, she swallowed the pill and headed straight for the shower. Desire pulsed through her veins, mixing with a growing sense of anticipation. She lingered in the shower, letting the hot water cascade over her skin, trying to wash away her anxiety. After drying off, she slipped into a light blue sundress and made her way to the bedroom. The freshly made bed, with its crisp white sheets, seemed to mock her. This was her and William's bed, a place of shared intimacy and love. And soon, she'd be sharing it with another man. Shame washed over her as she caught sight of their wedding photo on the nightstand. William smiled back at her, his eyes full of love and trust. Blair quickly flipped the photo face down, unable to bear his gaze. The larger framed photo on the wall, however, remained a silent sentinel to her impending betrayal. Ryan arrived promptly at 3. Blair's house was located in a quiet, upscale neighborhood on the outskirts of the city, a development of large, modern homes where everyone knew their neighbors, but no one really knew each other. Privacy wasn't an issue, but Blair still felt her cheeks burning as she led Ryan inside. She offered him a glass of water, then sat down opposite him on the couch, self-consciously smoothing down her dress and tucking her legs beneath her. She felt completely out of her element. Ryan, bless his heart, seemed just as flustered. He sipped his water nervously, his gaze darting everywhere but towards Blair. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, Blair, mustering what little courage she had left, spoke, her voice coming out in a breathless rush. "Why don't you go take a shower? The bathroom is just down the hall." Ryan looked up, hesitant. Are you going to shower, too?" he asked in a small voice. Blair shook her head, her face flushing even deeper. "No, I already showered." While Ryan was in the bathroom, Blair went around the bedroom, closing the blinds on the windows. Her hands trembled as she worked, despite the fact that the room remained bathed in soft, diffused daylight. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her entire body thrumming with nervous energy. She'd never felt so anxious, so excited, so utterly out of control. This was by far the most daring thing she'd ever done, a complete departure from her usual cautious nature. A mix of anticipation and desire, a feeling she hadn't experienced in far too long, coursed through her veins. Would it be different with William? How would it compare to being with Ryan? The steady rush of water from the shower filled the silence. Blair, her nerves stretched taut, got up and went to the kitchen for another glass of water. Anything to calm the frantic beating of her heart. She put on some soft music. It was something she and William always did when they were intimate, a familiar ritual that felt both comforting and unsettling in this new context. When she returned to the bedroom, Ryan had emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. His clothes were presumably hanging in the bathroom, and Blair couldn't help but think, Britney's already taught him well. He stood there, awkwardly looking at her, his cheeks flushed. Blair, despite her own apprehension, met his gaze directly. This was it. She forced a smile, trying to appear nonchalant as she walked towards the bed and sat down on the edge. After a moment's hesitation, Ryan followed. Blair's gaze fell on the towel, and Ryan, misinterpreting her look, shifted uncomfortably, his hands fidgeting at his sides. The air crackled with tension, the silence growing unbearable. Finally, Blair, unable to contain her curiosity a moment longer. As if on cue, the towel dropped to the floor. Blair, her face burning, stared, unable to tear her gaze away. She was surprised. For someone so young, Ryan was surprisingly well endowed, even more so than William. Blair felt a strange mix of desire and guilt wash over her. She wanted to touch him, but shame held her back. This felt so wrong, such a betrayal of William's trust. She closed her eyes, trying to will away the conflicting emotions. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. Ryan remained frozen in place, his own embarrassment evident. He was clearly intimidated by Blair, a woman years older and infinitely more experienced. Still with her eyes closed, Blair reached out, her fingers tentatively brushing against his skin. She could feel the heat radiating from him, the smooth, firm texture of his muscles. Ryan let out a shaky breath, unable to contain himself any longer. "Blair, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Blair, her hand trembling almost as much as his, opened her eyes, meeting his pleading gaze. She nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. "Oh my God, it's been so long since I felt this." Blair was flustered, a mix of thrill and a curious sense of daring bubbling inside her. A blush crept up her neck as she gave a barely perceptible nod, a silent agreement escaping her lips. Britney, her mischievous friend, must have schooled this boy well, she thought with a secret smile. It felt good, so good, and Blair closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her as she surrendered to the moment. But a part of her was still grappling with the reality of it all. Was this okay? What she was about to do was something she had never even considered before. Was this something she should only be doing with William? Then again, this was purely physical, a way to satiate a need that had been gnawing at her. It wasn't as if she loved her husband any less or that it would jeopardize their life together. Still, this was reckless, wasn't it? Should she stop? There was still time. Blair hesitated, torn between what her mind was telling her and the overwhelming temptation clouding her judgment. Ryan's innocent, almost cherubic face, a mixture of shyness and eagerness, was both endearing and exciting. Logic screamed at her to put a stop to this, but a fire had been lit inside her, an ache that had festered for months now, finally reaching its boiling point. With a sigh that was both surrender and acceptance, Blair shut her eyes tightly, unwilling to face the truth of what she was doing. "Oh, William, I'm so sorry," she whispered, the apology feeling more like a justification to her own ears. In that moment, Blair couldn't process anything else. It was almost impossible to believe she was this uninhibited with another man. Ryan's gaze, open and guileless, only amplified the guilt and shame washing over her, forcing her to look away, unable to meet his eyes. Guilt or not, it went on for what felt like hours. Blair stepped into the shower, the cool water cascading over her heated skin. Catching her reflection in the mirror, she found herself studying her features. Her cheeks were flushed, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and a hesitant thrill, but her eyes held a spark, devoid of any real regret or remorse. This was it, her first time with another man, and it wasn't as earth-shattering as she had always imagined it. In fact, it was much less daunting than she had worked herself up to believe. Ryan was still lying in bed, watching her with a look of adoration and gratitude in his eyes. A small smile played on Blair's lips in response. They didn't speak, a comfortable silence settling between them as they both reveled in the afterglow, the faint light painting the room in soft hues. "There's no need to say it," Blair finally murmured, breaking the silence. "But you know this needs to stay between us, right? Absolutely no one can find out." Ryan nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Don't worry, your secret's safe with me. I hardly ever tell anyone anything, anyway. And besides," he added, a small smile playing on his lips, "Britney said no one would believe me even if I did tell. They'd never believe someone like you and Britney, beautiful, successful women with good jobs, would ever look twice at a college kid like me." Blair chuckled softly. "Well, good. It's for the best. It's just, things could get messy." As he was leaving, he asked, "What time do you need to pick up your son?" Glancing at her watch, Blair realized she still had some time. "Not yet, there's no rush. You can stay a bit longer if you'd like." Truth be told, she wasn't quite ready for him to leave. The 2 rounds had left her feeling pleasantly relaxed and she was surprised by her own desire, a craving she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was the novelty of it all, so different from what she was used to with William. They showered and dressed, and with a lingering goodbye, Ryan finally took his leave. Aiden, her son, was waiting. On Monday, during their usual lunch break, Britney dragged Blair to their favorite spot. As they ate, Britney couldn't contain her curiosity, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "How is Ryan?" she asked, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. Blair blushed, a wave of heat creeping up her neck, but she couldn't hide the satisfied smile that spread across her face. Glancing around to make sure no one was listening, she swatted her friend playfully on the arm. "You're terrible. What if someone heard you?" Britney chuckled, unfazed. "And what if they did? They wouldn't know what we were talking about, would they?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping even lower. "Come on, tell me, how was he? Pretty good, right? I told you, I don't recommend duds." Blair blushed even deeper, nodding slightly. Yeah, he was good, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. But honestly, I don't know how to feel about it. I've been thinking about it all night, and I feel so guilty, like I'm cheating on William. Britney waved her hand dismissively. Oh please, don't overthink it. It was just fun, harmless fun. It's not like you're developing feelings for the guy. You're still you, and William is still William. It doesn't change anything. Later that night, lying in bed with Aiden snuggled against her, Blair replayed the events of the previous day in her mind. Britney was right, wasn't she? It was just a physical release, a way to deal with the frustration and longing. It didn't diminish her love for William, nor her commitment to their family. And besides, wasn't it better than seeking out a real affair? At least this way, William's heart remained untouched, she reasoned, trying to justify her actions. Men, they were all the same, weren't they? A little over a week had passed, and while the guilt hadn't completely dissipated, Blair found herself missing the unfamiliar thrill, the excitement of it all. She had considered asking Britney to set up another rendezvous, but a wave of shyness always seemed to hold her back. Thankfully, Britney, always intuitive when it came to her best friend, seemed to read her mind. Need me to give Ryan a call? She asked with a knowing smirk. Blair's only response was a sheepish nod, her cheeks turning a delicate shade of pink. This time, Blair decided they needed a change of pace, something a little less rushed. She suggested Saturday morning, wanting to savor the anticipation. But Ryan had a tutoring session he couldn't reschedule, so they agreed to meet in the early afternoon. The initial awkwardness from their first encounter seemed to have evaporated. This time, Blair found herself surprised by her own boldness. It was true what they said, everything was easier the second time around. There was a renewed sense of enthusiasm, a passion that took Blair by surprise. This felt different, almost primal, even more intense than anything she had shared with William. From that day forward, it became almost routine. Every few weeks, Blair would give Britney a discreet nod, and a call would be made. Weekends were ideal, giving Blair a chance to drop Aiden off with her in-laws. But sometimes, the need was too strong to ignore, and she found herself arranging afternoon trysts on weekdays as well. A sudden migraine, she'd tell her boss, excusing herself for the rest of the day. By that hour, most of the neighbors were at work, their street eerily quiet and deserted. Aiden was safe at school, happily enrolled in the after-school program. Although she was perfectly capable of calling Ryan herself, Blair couldn't quite bring herself to do it. There was a strange sense of shame, a nagging feeling in the back of her mind that this wasn't right. Or was it something else entirely? Ever since her first encounter with Ryan, Blair had noticed a change in herself. It was as if a dormant part of her had been awakened, leaving her feeling refreshed, radiant, like a flower finally getting the water it craved. But despite her newfound glow, Blair couldn't shake the awkwardness she felt, constantly relying on her friend to make the arrangements. It's not fair to Ryan, she confessed to Britney one day. He's seen you too, you know. I don't want to be greedy, and he has his studies to focus on. And so, for a while, they fell into a comfortable rhythm, their encounters becoming a regular part of Blair's life. Weekends were ideal, giving Blair a chance to drop Aiden off with her in-laws. But sometimes, the need was too strong to ignore, and she found herself arranging afternoon trysts on weekdays as well. This arrangement continued until Ryan's exams approached, and his parents, ever the watchful guardians, tightened the reins, restricting his every move. It was as if they sensed something was amiss, although Blair highly doubted they knew the actual truth. The sudden drought left Blair restless, her usual calm replaced by a constant, simmering frustration. I haven't slept all night, she confessed to Britney one morning over coffee, her usual energy replaced with an exhausted sigh. Britney's lips curved into a mischievous grin. Honey, you should have said something. There are plenty of fish in the sea, you know. I always have a backup or two, or three, she added with a wink. She pondered for a moment, her fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the table. She began, a glint in her eye. There is this one guy, Chase. Super cute, goes to UW, the business school. Trust me, he is top-notch. Blair blushed, unsure whether to be amused or slightly terrified by her friend's nonchalance. "Are you sure about this guy? Does he know how to keep his mouth shut? Is he, nice? Discreet?" Britney laughed, waving her hand dismissively. "Relax. Of course, I vetted him. Do you think I'd put myself at risk? I'm not an amateur, I only work with the best." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "And besides, he's from out of town. Parents are nowhere near Washington. You get the picture, right?" Britney's confidence was contagious, and Blair found herself agreeing, reassured by her friend's guarantee. Britney continued, "Do you want to meet him for coffee? Or should I just give him your number?" Intrigued, Blair opted for a quick introduction. "Let's meet him, but make it quick. I don't want to keep the poor guy waiting." With a triumphant grin, Britney pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. "He's actually not too far from here. Should be here in 15, tops." True to her word, Chase arrived within 15 minutes. Blair's first impression was that Britney wasn't exaggerating. He was strikingly handsome, boyishly charming with a clean-cut look, probably a sophomore or a junior, and slightly taller than Ryan, with a lean, athletic build that was hard to miss. Britney, sticking to her usual script, kept the conversation light and casual, careful not to broach any sensitive topics. Chase, Blair noted, seemed respectful and polite, almost to the point of shyness, not unlike Ryan. After a brief chat, he excused himself, explaining that he had to get to class. As soon as he was out of earshot, Britney turned to Blair, a mischievous glint in her eye. "So, what do you think?" "He seems nice," Blair replied, carefully neutral. "Maybe a bit on the quiet side." Britney's laugh rang out, loud and carefree. She was about to say something else when she seemed to think better of it, a knowing smile playing on her lips instead. The following Saturday, Blair arranged to have Chase over to her house. She dropped Aiden off at her in-laws earlier that day, ensuring she had the house to herself. As promised, Chase arrived right on time. He still seemed a little shy, reserved even, but Blair could see a flicker of excitement in his eyes, a spark that mirrored her own. They chatted for a bit, both trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the charged atmosphere. But the more time they spent together, the more Blair realized how timid Chase seemed, too nervous to even broach the subject of why he was really there. Taking a deep breath, Blair decided to take the reins. "Let's go upstairs," she suggested, her cheeks warming under his gaze. "Don't worry," she added with a reassuring smile. "There's nothing to be nervous about. It's perfectly natural." Chase simply nodded, a shy smile spreading across his face. He was tall and somewhat slender, with a boyish charm, but Blair noticed the toned muscles beneath his t-shirt, the kind that came from regular workouts. As if on cue, his towel slipped, revealing more than Blair had bargained for. She couldn't help but notice how different he was from Ryan. Her breath hitched in her throat as her body responded instinctively to the sight. An undeniable rhythm had begun, pulling them closer together. On Monday, back at work and having lunch with Britney, Blair found herself the target of her friend's mischievous interrogation. With a wink and a sly grin, Britney leaned in, her voice barely a whisper. "So, how was Chase? He's quite the catch, isn't he?" Blair, trying to appear nonchalant despite the warmth creeping up her neck, could only manage a small, tight-lipped smile. She glanced around the office cafeteria, making sure no one was within earshot, before hissing back, "Britney. Not so loud." Lowering her voice, she conceded, "He was good. But a little timid, It's like he was afraid of me or something." Britney burst out laughing, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Oh, Blair, you and your effect on men. Don't worry, he'll come around. You'll see." She winked again, a knowing look in her eye. Later that night, as Blair lay in bed, her thoughts drifted to Chase. It was becoming a nightly ritual, the image of him popping into her head the moment she closed her eyes. Guilt gnawed at her. She had a wonderful husband, a beautiful son, and here she was, fantasizing about another man. What was wrong with her? On Wednesday evening, her phone rang. It was William calling from Germany. Blair's heart skipped a beat. She had been so caught up in her daydreams about Chase that she felt a pang of guilt, as if William had somehow caught her red-handed. She'd never been good at lying, and her usual ease with her husband was replaced by a nervous stammer. "Is everything all right? You seem different," William observed, his voice laced with concern. "It's nothing, really," Blair mumbled, hating the tremor in her voice. "Just a bit of a sore throat. That's all." If only he could see her now, her flushed cheeks and flustered expression a dead giveaway. Thankfully, William seemed to buy it. "Make sure you take care of yourself, honey," he said, ever the caring husband. "Drink lots of water and gargle with salt water. It'll pass." They chatted for a few more minutes before William had to go. Blair breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that he hadn't suspected a thing. It was a close call. A little too close. "This is ridiculous," Blair muttered to herself, her hand trembling as she set the phone down. Why was she so on edge? It wasn't like she had actually done anything wrong. Well, not technically. That night, a vivid dream woke Blair with a start. She dreamt she and Chase were in the throes of passion when William suddenly walked in, suitcase in hand, back from his business trip. The look on his face, the sheer betrayal. Blair sat up in bed, heart pounding, drenched in a cold sweat. She reached for Aiden, pulling him close, seeking comfort in his innocent slumber. It was a long time before she drifted back to sleep. Despite the guilt and anxiety, Blair couldn't deny the powerful pull she felt toward Chase. She was both ashamed and surprised by her own desires. She'd just seen him a few days ago, yet she missed him already. How had he gotten under her skin so quickly? Should she call him? The thought had been playing on loop in her mind, making it impossible to focus on work. She tried to reason with herself. It was too soon, too risky. They should wait until the weekend, at least. But the need, that insistent ache, refused to be ignored. As if reading her mind, Blair's mother-in-law called later that evening with a request. They were having people over that weekend, and could Blair and Aiden possibly spend the night? They could use the extra pair of hands, she explained. "A whole weekend without seeing Chase? I don't think I can wait that long," Blair thought to herself. The next morning, with the house empty and her in-laws none the wiser, Blair gave in. Heart-pounding, she dialed Chase's number. The moment she heard his voice on the other end, a wave of guilt washed over her. Quickly composing herself, she asked him to join her that evening. Chase, sensing her intentions, didn't hesitate. He was supposed to be at the library, studying for an upcoming exam, but he was willing to play hooky for a few hours. "Don't worry about missing my study session," Chase teased, his voice dropping to a suggestive murmur. "I can think of a few things that are far more educational." Blair blushed, choosing to ignore his innuendo. She wasn't sure if she was amused or mortified by his boldness. With a date set with Chase, Blair's next dilemma was Aiden. She couldn't very well send her son to her in-laws again. They hadn't explicitly questioned her recent weekend absences, but she could sense their curiosity. Sending Aiden to her own parents was out of the question. They lived too far away, and hiring a babysitter felt like an unnecessary risk. "Maybe I should just have Aiden stay home," Blair thought. "My son's only 6. He won't understand what's going on." But what if William called and wanted to talk to his son? It had happened before, and Blair always fumbled for an explanation whenever Aiden wasn't around. Then, it hit her. "I'll tell William that Chase is my Chinese tutor," she decided. "William was pushing me to learn Chinese before he left for Germany. He thought it would be helpful for work." It was the perfect cover story. Blair much preferred the idea of private lessons to attending a stuffy language school, and William had fully supported her decision. It's not like he would object to her choice of tutor, especially one so young and unassuming. That evening, after Aiden had finished dinner, Blair sat him down. "Honey, Mommy's going to be studying tonight, upstairs in the guest room. I got you that new cartoon you wanted, remember? You can watch that, read your comics, or work on your coloring book. Just promise you won't interrupt Mommy while she's studying, okay?" Aiden nodded enthusiastically, his eyes wide with childish innocence. Looking at him, Blair felt a pang of guilt. She hated lying to her son, even if it was a little white lie. Just this once, she promised herself. When William's back, everything will go back to normal. Family first, always. Blair headed upstairs for a quick shower. Chase arrived promptly at 7 p.m. Aiden, perched on the living room couch, looked up as Chase entered the house. Aiden, say hi to Chase, sweetheart. He's going to be helping Mommy with Chinese, Blair said, trying to sound casual despite the tremor in her voice. Aiden, ever the obedient child, hopped off the couch and offered Chase a polite greeting. He's adorable, Blair. Looks just like his dad, Chase remarked, smiling at Aiden. Despite knowing her son was oblivious to the true nature of the situation, Blair couldn't shake the feeling of shame. With a few more rushed instructions and a reassuring pat on Aiden's head, she ushered Chase upstairs, leaving Aiden to his cartoons. As they climbed the steps, Blair felt a familiar tremor of excitement mixed with a healthy dose of guilt. This was the first time she was entertaining a man other than her husband in their home, in their bedroom, no less. The soft lighting, the familiar scent of their sheets, the faint echo of music from the Bluetooth speaker, it all served as a visceral reminder of countless nights spent with William. The thought sent a fresh wave of guilt washing over her. He's good, Britney, really good, Blair thought to herself, trying to stifle a moan as Chase's lips trailed down her neck. Suddenly, a series of insistent knocks on the bedroom door shattered the mood. Mommy? Mommy Blair? Aiden's sweet, childlike voice filtered through the door, pulling Blair back to reality. Panic jolted through her. Had he heard them? 1 minute, sweetie. Mommy's busy right now, Blair called out, her voice breathless and strained. How was she supposed to sound normal at a time like this? Aiden continued to knock, his small fists pounding against the door. With a sigh, Blair pulled herself away from Chase's embrace and scrambled for her robe. There was no way she was letting her son see the bedroom in its current state. She met Aiden outside the door, gently guiding him back downstairs. What is it, honey? What do you need? The cartoon, Mommy. It stopped. I don't know how to make it go again. Relieved that it was nothing serious, Blair followed Aiden back to the living room. It turned out the DVD had simply finished playing. Chase, looking slightly sheepish, emerged from the bedroom a few minutes later. They eventually resumed what they had started, although the previous interruption had taken its toll on the mood. After a quick shower, Chase left, the summer night cloaked in an awkward silence. The next morning, Blair woke up feeling strangely content. As she was getting ready for work, she caught her reflection in the mirror and had to smile. She really did look radiant. Her skin glowed, her eyes sparkled, a noticeable change that didn't go unnoticed by her coworkers. You look fantastic. What's your secret? They'd ask, their voices tinged with envy. Blair would just laugh it off, a blush warming her cheeks. If only they knew. Later that day, she ran into Britney, who greeted her with a knowing smirk. Someone's got that glow again, she teased, her eyes twinkling. Just be careful, Blair. Don't overdo it. Wouldn't want anyone getting suspicious. Blair blushed even deeper, muttering something about Britney being ridiculous as she scurried off. It had become a pattern, this insatiable need that seemed to rear its head every few days. Blair found herself craving Chase's touch, her body buzzing with a restless energy she hadn't felt in years. She knew she couldn't keep relying on Britney forever. It was only a matter of time before their little arrangement was discovered. After several sleepless nights spent wrestling with her desires, Blair decided to confide in Britney. On Friday, she arranged to meet her at their usual lakeside cafe, putting on her best damsel in distress act. Britney took one look at Blair's dejected expression and burst out laughing. Okay, what's going on? You look like you lost your best friend. Britney, you have to help me, Blair pleaded. I can't keep doing this sneaking around. It's driving me crazy. William's going to be gone for months, and my sister-in-law is staying with me now. I can't even go out for a walk without running into someone I know. What, are you scared of meeting your soulmate at a Starbucks? Britney teased, her eyes twinkling with mischief. This is serious, Brit. I'm going to lose my mind if this keeps up. What am I supposed to do?" Blair exclaimed, feeling her frustration mounting. Britney's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a thoughtful frown. "Well, we can't exactly book you a suite at the Ritz every time you need some stress relief. Someone will notice, especially with you being a regular at Aiden's school and all. Maybe we could get out of town? Like a weekend getaway or something," Blair offered. Britney snorted. "And what, make it a habit? Blair, we're not talking about a late-night craving for ice cream here. This is a whole operation." Blair sighed dramatically. You're right, I'm hopeless." Then, recalling a particularly steamy scene from a movie Britney had lent her, she sat up, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Britney, remember that device we saw the other day? The battery-operated one? Think you can get your hands on one of those?" Britney's jaw dropped as she stared at Blair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Oh my God, Blair. I had no idea you had it in you. You're a woman of many talents, aren't you?" Blair giggled, feeling a surge of both excitement and trepidation. "Well, I wouldn't go that far," she replied. "But desperate times call for desperate measures. And besides, who better to learn from than the best?" Britney promised to do her best to track down the toy, and they parted ways. As soon as Britney was out of sight, Blair hopped on her car and headed straight for the newspaper office. She had spotted a classified ad earlier that week. A family was looking for a live-in tutor for their 6-year-old son. Perfect. The ad listed a phone number. Blair quickly jotted it down, a plan already forming in her mind. This was her chance to take control, to create a situation that was both discreet and convenient. As expected, the phone started ringing off the hook the next day. Male callers were politely told to meet later. For female applicants, Blair simply stated that they had found someone. That afternoon, Blair set up shop at Lakeside Cafe, her makeshift interview station. Every 10 minutes, a new candidate arrived, eager to secure the tutoring position. Blair, a seasoned pro at sizing people up, quickly dismissed most of them, too old, too chatty, too eager. Then, a 5th candidate walked in, and Blair felt her breath catch in her throat. There was something about him, a raw, untamed energy that both intrigued and intimidated her. "What's your name?" Blair asked, her gaze lingering on the young man's rugged features. "Kyle, ma'am. I'm 18, from Spokane. My family just moved here, and I don't know anyone in Washington. I really need this job, ma'am. Even if you don't hire me for tutoring, maybe I could just stay at your house. I'd be forever grateful." Kyle was tall and muscular, with a disarmingly handsome face. But it was his eyes that captivated Blair, intense, almost wild, with a hint of vulnerability. "Give me a call tomorrow, around 4:30, Blair said, deciding to play it cool. "I need to discuss it with my husband first." Disappointment flickered across Kyle's face, but he nodded politely. "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate your time." As Kyle left, Blair couldn't help but smile. She knew she had found her solution. Now, all she needed was a convincing story to sell to her in-laws. Lost in thought, Blair almost didn't hear Britney's voice calling out to her. "Earth to Blair, what are you daydreaming about? Don't tell me you've already found your new man?" she teased, slowing down her car to pull up alongside Blair. Britney reached into her bag and pulled out a small box, tossing it to Blair. "Here you go. Had to pull a few strings, but your new toy is ready for action. Those kids these days, they drive a hard bargain. They wanted a night with me in exchange for this little toy." Blair's cheeks flushed, but she quickly brushed off Britney's joke. Yeah, you're a saint. Thanks, Brit. I owe you one." With a wink and a roar of her engine, Britney sped off, leaving Blair standing on the sidewalk, a mix of anticipation and nervousness bubbling inside her. After picking Aiden up from school, Blair made a quick stop at her in-laws' place. Casually, she mentioned that a colleague's nephew had recently moved to Washington for university but hadn't been able to secure a spot in the dorms. Apparently, the nephew had arrived late and was struggling to find affordable accommodation. "Their house is tiny, and we could really use some extra help with Aiden's homework," Blair explained, laying on the charm. I thought maybe we could let him stay with us for a while? What do you think? Robert and Susan, who trusted their daughter-in-law implicitly, agreed without hesitation. Of course, dear. It's wonderful that you're so willing to help. Just be sure to get to know him a little better before you make any promises, Susan advised. They chatted for a bit longer, Blair expertly deflecting any probing questions about her colleague's mysterious nephew. By the time she left, it was almost 9 p.m. After a long day, Blair was ready to relax. She tucked Aiden into bed, a pang of guilt washing over her as she kissed his forehead goodnight. Alone at last, Blair remembered the small box Britney had given her. A mischievous smile spread across her face as she retrieved it from her purse. Just as she was about to unpack it, her phone rang. It was Britney calling to check in. So, have you given it a test drive yet? Britney's voice crackled through the speaker, filled with playful curiosity. How is it? Tell me everything, and if you're done with it, you know I'm happy to borrow it back. Before Blair could answer, Britney hung up, leaving her with a mixture of amusement and frustration. The phone call had effectively killed the mood. Blair sighed, tucking the unopened box away in her vanity drawer. She was exhausted, and sleep was beckoning. Kyle arrived right on time, dressed in simple but clean clothes. He bowed his head respectfully. Good afternoon, ma'am. Have I kept you waiting? Not at all, come in, Blair replied, gesturing for him to enter. So, you're 18, right? Yes, ma'am. I'm almost 30. You can call me Blair. No need to be so formal. Yes, ma'am, I mean, Blair. Kyle stammered, his cheeks flushing pink. Blair spent the next hour getting to know Kyle, probing his background and gauging his personality. He seemed genuine, if a little rough around the edges. A solid 7 out of 10, Blair thought to herself. I'll give you a trial run for a week, Blair announced, her voice laced with a subtle warning. If things don't work out, well, don't say I didn't warn you. I'll work hard, Blair. I promise, Kyle replied eagerly. So, when do I start? Actually, why wait? How about we head back to my place now? You can settle in, and we can discuss the details tomorrow. Kyle seemed taken aback by her sudden offer. But, my things are still at my apartment. No worries, it's not far. We can grab your stuff later. Come on, let's go. Blair tossed him her car keys. A look of panic crossed Kyle's face. I don't know how to drive. We mostly ride horseback home, ma'am. Blair burst out laughing. Horses? Seriously? Have you ever even been on a car before? Just a couple of times, ma'am. Once with a taxi driver and another time when I came to meet you. It was scary. Well, hold on tight, Blair said, starting the engine. Don't worry, I'm a safe driver. She winked at Kyle. Back at Blair's house, she gave Kyle a tour, laying down the ground rules and handing him a $100 bill for his initial expenses. I'll see you tomorrow, Kyle. 5 o'clock sharp. Once Kyle was gone, Blair immediately called a security company, arranging for a discreet installation of hidden cameras throughout the house. She wanted to observe Kyle's every move, to make sure he was worthy of her trust. The next day at 5 p.m., Kyle returned, his meager belongings stuffed into a battered wicker suitcase. He sat awkwardly on the couch, waiting for instructions. So, we have 5 bedrooms, Blair explained. Downstairs, there's the living room, the dining room, and a bathroom. Aiden's playroom is also on the ground floor. Upstairs, there are 2 bedrooms, one for my husband and me, and a spare room. Which one do you want? Anywhere is fine, ma'am, Kyle replied earnestly. Just letting me stay here is a blessing. For now, you can sleep in the dining room. I'll set up a cot for you. Once we figure things out, we'll find you a more permanent room. From the moment he arrived, Kyle had been burning with curiosity about Blair's husband. Where was he? Why wasn't he around? Finally, he worked up the courage to ask. Blair, if you don't mind me asking, where is your husband? He's away on business. He'll be gone for a while, Blair replied vaguely, not wanting to reveal too much. Don't worry, I'll talk to him about you. Now, go ahead and get settled. I need to go pick up Aiden. With that, Blair retreated upstairs, eager to check the footage from the newly installed cameras. She watched as Kyle explored the house, his eyes wide with wonder. It was clear he was impressed by the elegant decor, everything so new and foreign to him. After 20 minutes, Blair's patience wore thin. It was time to pick up Aiden from school. Oh well, plenty of time to play later, she thought to herself, heading back downstairs. Kyle, aren't you going to unpack and freshen up? She asked, surprised to find him still sitting awkwardly on the couch. I haven't yet, Blair, Kyle stammered, looking flustered. Make yourself at home, Blair said, her voice softening. I'll be back soon. As she left the house, Blair couldn't wait to review the footage later that night. She had a feeling it was going to be interesting. After picking up Aiden and returning home, Blair focused on making dinner and getting her son settled for the night. By the time she had a free moment, it was already past 7 p.m. Aiden, Kyle, come join me in the living room, she called out. Blair was amused to discover that, in her absence, Aiden and Kyle had already become fast friends. Aiden, always full of energy, seemed to have taken a shine to the shy, but gentle, young man. Once Aiden was asleep, Blair went back to her bedroom and eagerly reviewed the footage from the hidden cameras. Everything seemed normal until Kyle went into the bathroom. Blair's heart skipped a beat. The country boy was clearly not accustomed to city life. He wasn't wearing any underwear, and he had no idea how to use the shower, opting instead to fill a bucket with water and pour it over himself. He never once turned to face the camera, so Blair only caught glimpses of his backside. With a chuckle, Blair turned off the computer and went to bed. The next week was a crash course in city living for Kyle. Blair patiently taught him how to use the appliances, how to dress, and how to navigate the social nuances of Washington life. Kyle, eager to please, was a quick learner. One evening, as Blair was getting ready for bed, she caught Kyle's eye as he walked past her bedroom door. She was wearing one of her silk nightgowns, the fabric clinging to her curves. A deep blush spread across Kyle's face, and he quickly averted his gaze. Blair smiled to herself. Her plan was working. Like a persistent rain softening the earth, she was slowly molding Kyle to her desires, preparing him for what was to come. That afternoon, after picking Aiden up from school, Blair pretended to be heading for a shower. Kyle, can you check if the water is running downstairs? It seems like there's no pressure up here, she called out. Yes, Blair, the water's working fine down here, Kyle's voice called back from the living room. Blair, still clad in her short dress, sauntered downstairs, making sure to pause by Kyle's makeshift bed in the dining room. She struck up a casual conversation, pretending to be oblivious to the intensity of his gaze. She knew he was imagining all sorts of things, his mind racing behind those innocent eyes. Blair deliberately took a long, leisurely shower, savoring the anticipation. When she finally emerged, she was wearing nothing but a flimsy silk robe. She walked past Kyle, not meeting his eyes, and headed upstairs, leaving him speechless and flustered. A quick glance at the camera footage revealed Kyle rushing into the bathroom, his desire evident. Blair had intentionally left some of her lingerie within his reach. And now, we wait, she thought to herself, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. The first stage of her plan was a resounding success. Later that evening, while Kyle was tutoring Aiden, Blair came downstairs to check on their progress. She stood in front of Kyle, deliberately bending over to examine Aiden's workbook, her low-cut top giving him an ample view of her cleavage. Blair returned to her room, a satisfied smirk on her face. It was time to take things to the next level. As usual, Aiden would be spending Saturday with his grandparents. After work on Friday, Blair went to the post office and sent herself an express package. She used the name of a friend who lived abroad, ensuring it wouldn't raise any suspicion. The package was scheduled for delivery before 11 a.m. the next morning. Before leaving for work the following morning, Blair reminded Kyle, "If anyone comes by or calls, let me know, okay?" At precisely 11 a.m., Blair's phone rang. It was Kyle, his voice hesitant and polite. "Blair, there's a package from the post office, but they won't let me sign for it." "No problem, Kyle. Go upstairs to my bedroom and get my passport from the top drawer of my desk. Show it to the delivery guy, and he'll let you sign for it. My bedroom key is under the rug." This was Blair's way of testing Kyle's honesty and observing his reaction to being alone in her private sanctuary. She had carefully arranged the room to appear as if she had just left in a hurry, leaving a few strategic items in plain sight. As expected, Kyle seemed overwhelmed by the feminine energy of Blair's bedroom. It was a world he had never experienced before: luxurious lingerie strewn carelessly across the bed, a fluffy pillow with a faint scent of her perfume. The cameras captured his every move as his gaze lingered on the intimate details, his desire palpable. When Blair returned home that evening, she noticed that Kyle was nowhere to be found. Intrigued, she went straight to her bedroom and replayed the footage from the cameras. A slow smile spread across her face as she watched Kyle fumble around her room, clearly captivated by his surroundings. "Now, how do I use this to my advantage?" she wondered aloud. "If I'm too obvious, he'll know I'm playing him, and then I'll have no leverage. He might even try to use it against me." Just then, she heard Kyle's footsteps approaching the front door. Quickly, she went downstairs and busied herself in the kitchen, pretending to prepare dinner. "Blair, I just delivered the package. I left it on your desk," Kyle announced, entering the dining room. "Great, thanks Kyle. I'll check it out after dinner. No rush," Blair replied casually. As if by accident, she dropped the sugar jar from the countertop. It shattered on the floor with a loud crash, sending sugar flying everywhere. Startled, Kyle rushed into the kitchen. "Oh, clumsy me. I made a mess," Blair said nonchalantly, already sweeping up the spilled sugar. She quickly gathered her things and headed for the bathroom, explaining that she needed to wash off the sticky residue. A few minutes later, Blair called out, "Kyle, are you there?" "Yes, Blair," came his hesitant reply. "I'm in a bit of a rush. Could you be a dear and grab me some clean clothes from my bedroom? They're on the top shelf of my closet." Blair could practically hear Kyle's heart pounding through the walls. He knew exactly what he would find in her closet, and she was counting on his curiosity getting the better of him. Just how much should I let him see? She wondered, a mischievous glint in her eye. Too much, and he might get spooked. But a little tease, that should be enough to whet his appetite. Just as Kyle reached the top of the stairs, Blair cracked open the bathroom door, giving him a glimpse of her partially clad figure. His jaw dropped, his eyes wide with shock and desire. For a moment, he just stood there, frozen in place. Then, as if remembering where he was and who he was with, he quickly averted his gaze, a flush creeping up his neck. "Dinner's almost ready, Kyle. Go ahead and set the table, and I'll be out in a few minutes," Blair called out, pretending not to notice his reaction. Before leaving the bathroom, Blair ran a wet hand through her hair, letting a few droplets cascade down her neck. She wanted to leave nothing to chance. Kyle, his appetite thoroughly whetted, sat at the dining table, a nervous anticipation radiating from him. He was like a hungry wolf, patiently waiting for his prey. Blair sat down across from Kyle, her damp hair cascading down her back, and decided it was time for the final act. "Do you drink, Kyle?" she asked casually. "Yes, Blair. Back home, even the 10-year-old boys are allowed to drink," Kyle replied with a hint of pride. "A mountain man who can't hold his liquor is no man at all." "Of course," Blair chuckled. "Go ahead and grab that bottle of brandy from the living room cabinet, the one with the XO on it." While Kyle was retrieving the brandy, Blair discreetly scooted her chair closer to the table, her thighs pressing together. Kyle returned with the bottle and 2 small glasses. Blair poured a generous amount into one of the glasses and handed it to him. "You go ahead. I don't drink." Kyle looked at her, surprised. "But, I thought this was your husband's brandy? You said he likes a little drink with dinner sometimes." Well, I received some good news today, so I thought we could celebrate, Blair explained. But it's no fun drinking alone. Come on, Kyle, don't be shy. But what if you get drunk, Blair? You might get sick. Kyle protested, concerned. Nonsense. One little drink won't hurt me. But if I do get drunk, you'll have to take responsibility for me, okay? She teased, batting her eyelashes playfully. It's Saturday, Blair. You don't have to work tomorrow. If you get drunk, you can just sleep it off. I'll take care of everything, the dishes, Aiden, everything. I promise. Kyle assured her, eager to see her indulge. Finally, Blair relented, lifting the glass to her lips and taking a small sip. She scrunched up her face and shook her head, feigning disgust. This is strong. It burns, she exclaimed, her voice laced with a dramatic tremor. But, there's a strange sweetness at the back of my throat. Interesting. Kyle, encouraged by her reaction, reassured her. Don't worry, Blair. The girls back home, they can drink a whole bottle of this and still be standing. Blair, playing her role to perfection, took another sip, grimacing theatrically before, accidentally, dropping her spoon on the floor. She reached under the table to retrieve it, but her chair was too close. As she was about to move it back, Kyle jumped in. Let me get it, Blair. Quick as a flash, Blair pulled the spoon between her thighs, pressing it firmly against her core. She knew Kyle would have a hard time resisting the temptation. He fumbled under the table for what felt like an eternity, his face turning a deep shade of red. When he finally emerged, spoon in hand, Blair could see the desire burning in his eyes. He had taken the bait. Kyle downed his brandy in one gulp and poured himself another. Blair smiled to herself. Her plan was working. By his sixth glass, Kyle's inhibitions had loosened considerably. He leaned forward, his voice husky. Aren't you going to have another drink, Blair? Go on, have some more. I can help you finish the bottle. Blair giggled, playing the part of the tipsy seductress. She took another large gulp, pretending to choke and cough before excusing herself to the bathroom. Kyle shifted uncomfortably in his chair, torn between his desire and his fear of overstepping his boundaries. He knew Blair wasn't really drunk, but she was putting on a convincing act. He paced back and forth in the dining room, listening for any sounds from the bathroom. After what felt like an eternity, he couldn't take it anymore. He cautiously pushed open the bathroom door. Blair, are you all right? He whispered, his voice thick with concern. There was no response. He found Blair slumped against the bathtub, her eyes closed. Gently, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to her bedroom, laying her down on the bed. For a moment, he thought he had succeeded. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. But then, as he leaned in for a kiss, he hesitated. He looked down at Blair's sleeping form, her chest rising and falling rhythmically, and a wave of guilt washed over him. He couldn't take advantage of her like this. Reluctantly, Kyle backed away, retreating to the dining room, his desire warring with his conscience. Blair, listening intently from her bedroom, sighed in frustration. So close, yet so far. After a while, she heard no more sounds coming from downstairs. Curiosity got the better of her. Quietly, she crept out of bed and turned on the monitor connected to the hidden cameras. She found Kyle in the dining room, the brandy bottle in hand. He was drinking steadily, his expression a mixture of longing and frustration. Suddenly, Kyle stood up and walked into the bathroom. Blair quickly switched to the bathroom camera. Oh, for God's sake, she muttered, exasperated. She had gone through all this trouble, and he was just going to. Kyle, bring me a bucket, she yelled, pretending to be sick. Kyle came rushing upstairs, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the hallway. He found Blair lying in bed, her eyes glazed over, feigning a drunken stupor. William, honey? Where have you been? It's been so long. I've missed you so much, she mumbled, her words slurred. Kyle, completely taken in by her act, kneeled beside the bed, his voice thick with emotion. I'm here now, Blair. I'm here, he whispered, reaching out to touch her face. Blair smiled to herself. Her little performance was working. Just as Kyle leaned in for a kiss, she accidentally brushed his hand away, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through him. They were so close, on the verge of something. But then, just as abruptly as he had arrived, Kyle pulled away, his face pale and drawn. He mumbled something about needing some air and rushed out of the house, leaving Blair lying alone in her bed, a wave of disappointment washing over her. Round 1. A failure, she thought to herself, sighing in defeat. She had misjudged him. Kyle was not as easy to seduce as she had anticipated. The next morning, Kyle left a hastily scribbled note on the dining room table. Blair, I felt homesick yesterday, so I went back to Spokane for the night. I'll be back early Monday morning. Kyle spent his Sunday in Spokane trying to get advice from his friends who had girlfriends. He hoped they could shed some light on how to win over a woman like Blair. But all they wanted to talk about was his life in Washington, his studies, and the excitement of the big city. Discouraged, Kyle was about to give up when he stumbled upon an old man, known throughout the region for his traditional remedies. The man was haggling over the price of a jet black bird with a local farmer. Intrigued, Kyle waited until the transaction was complete before asking, "What's so special about that bird? Why did you pay so much for it?" "You're young, so you wouldn't know." The old man chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "But this bird, my boy, is a miracle worker." Kyle looked at him, puzzled. The old man, sensing his confusion, continued, "You're going back to Washington tomorrow, right? Come have dinner with me this evening. I'll tell you all about it." Over a hearty meal, the old man revealed the secret of the black bird. It was a key ingredient in a potent traditional remedy, a secret passed down through generations of his family. As Kyle listened intently, he realized that this was exactly what he needed. Subtly, Kyle inquired about the preparation and dosage, eventually persuading the old man to give him a small portion of the remedy. He explained that he wanted to offer it to his landlady as a gesture of gratitude. The old man, impressed by Kyle's sincerity, readily agreed. Back in Washington, Kyle eagerly awaited Blair's return. He had a plan, a way to finally win her over. That afternoon, when Blair came home from work, she found Kyle tidying up the living room. Well, how was your trip back home? I was so out of it last night. I don't even remember going to bed," she said playfully, feigning a hangover. "I'm sorry about that, Blair. I didn't know you couldn't hold your liquor," Kyle mumbled, avoiding her gaze. "No worries. It happens. A little fun every now and then is good for the soul," Blair replied with a wink. "So, did you bring me back a souvenir?" Blair was starting to think she needed a new strategy. This shy, innocent act was getting her nowhere. Little did she know that Kyle had a plan of his own, inspired by the old man's secret remedy. On Saturday morning, as Blair was about to leave with Aiden, Kyle made his move. "Blair, let me cook lunch for you today. I'll make you some of my grandma's special mountain recipes," he said, his voice earnest. "Oh, that's so sweet of you, Kyle. But I'm having lunch with Aiden at my in-laws' place today," Blair replied, trying to let him down gently. "How about dinner then?" Kyle pressed. "Please, Blair? It won't be the same without you." Before Blair could answer, he added, his voice dropping to a husky whisper, "I'll be waiting for you." Blair left the house, a knowing smile playing on her lips. She had a feeling Kyle was about to surprise her. Sure enough, just past 10 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text message from Kyle. "Come home for lunch. I'm waiting." Blair didn't return home until just past 11 a.m. As she opened the gate, she was greeted by a beaming Kyle. "I thought you weren't coming. I was about to eat all by myself," he exclaimed, clearly relieved to see her. "Don't worry, Kyle, I wouldn't miss this for the world," Blair replied with a playful smile. "Now, park my car and go freshen up. Lunch is almost ready." Blair went to her purse, retrieving a small pill she had planned to slip into Kyle's drink. But then, remembering the cameras, she decided to check the footage from earlier that morning. On the screen, she saw Kyle busying himself in the kitchen, preparing a mysterious concoction. He was cooking some kind of porridge, but what caught Blair's eye was a small, dark packet he had added to the pot. Intrigued, she rewound the footage, listening intently to Kyle's whispered words. "Just for you, Blair." It dawned on her. Kyle had been planning to drug her. She had underestimated him. Instead of being the predator, she had become the prey. A wave of excitement washed over her. This was even better than she had imagined. Blair decided to play along, forgoing the pill she had brought from her purse. She freshened up, adding a touch of perfume for good measure, and joined Kyle in the living room. He had set the table for two, placing it strategically in front of the couch, where she would have no choice but to sit with her legs exposed. "What are we having today?" Blair asked, lifting the lid of the electric pot. "What is this? It looks intense, but it smells delicious." "It's black bone chicken congee, Blair. My grandma's special recipe. It has black beans, herbs, and some other good stuff. It's supposed to be really good for your health. You'll have glowing skin after eating this," Kyle explained, his eyes twinkling. "Oh, you think I need my skin to glow any brighter?" Blair teased, her voice laced with a suggestive lilt. Kyle blushed, looking down at his plate. "Come on, Kyle, tell me, do you think I'm beautiful?" Blair pressed, leaning closer. "You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, Blair," Kyle mumbled, unable to meet her gaze. After lunch, things unfolded exactly as Kyle had planned. Terrified by what he had done, he left a note on Blair's bedside table. "Blair, I can't face you. If you can forgive me, please leave the gate unlocked tonight. If not, I understand. I'm so sorry." Blair chuckled to herself as she read his note. How adorably naive. That night, after Aiden was asleep, Blair went for a long shower, taking her time to wash her hair and dry it. She then went outside and unlocked the gate, scanning the street anxiously. There was no sign of Kyle. Disappointed, she was about to go back inside when she heard a voice behind her. "Blair, please, forgive me?" Before Kyle could finish his plea, Blair turned and walked back into the house, leaving him standing there, unsure of what to do. She waited until he had showered and changed, then called him upstairs. Kyle, nervous and anxious, entered Blair's bedroom. "You wanted to see me, Blair?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Do you know what you did wrong, Kyle?" Blair asked, her voice stern. "Yes, Blair, I know I wronged you. I'm so sorry," Kyle pleaded, his head bowed in shame. "I forgive you, Kyle. But you need to understand something," Blair said, her voice softening. What happened today, it needs to stay between us. You cannot tell anyone about this, especially not my husband. Do you understand?" And so, they began their secret affair. Blair, nourished by her newfound freedom, seemed to grow younger and more radiant with each passing day. Kyle, despite Blair's lavish care and attention, seemed to be wasting away. Weeks turned into months. Their secret rendezvous became a regular part of their lives, a dangerous dance they couldn't seem to stop. Then, one day, Blair received a call from William. He was finishing his studies in Germany and would be returning home in 3 days. On Saturday, Blair told Kyle that she was going shopping for Aiden. She also invited Britney to come over, knowing that her friend wouldn't be able to resist flirting with Kyle if given the opportunity. "Don't worry, I've got this handled," Blair reassured Kyle before leaving the house. "And remember, don't tell anyone about us. If anyone asks, just say you're a cousin from out of town who's staying for a few days while you look for an apartment." Kyle, who had become adept at keeping their secret, nodded earnestly. 20 minutes later, as planned, Blair returned home. Britney's car was parked in the driveway, but Blair could hear hushed voices coming from her bedroom upstairs. Feigning indifference, she settled down in the living room, pretending to read a magazine. A long, tense silence followed. Finally, Britney's voice rang out, a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Oh my God, Blair. You sly dog, you've been holding out on me." "Oh, you're incorrigible, Britney," Blair retorted, trying to sound annoyed. "So, are you still coming shopping with me, or are you too busy?" she added pointedly. Rain check, please. I'm exhausted. Britney replied, rushing out of the bedroom and practically flying out of the house. Blair could only imagine Kyle's reaction to seeing her sitting calmly in the living room, having witnessed his indiscretion. She called his name, but there was no answer. Deciding to take matters into her own hands, she walked to the local shopping district, hoping to clear her head. When she returned home at noon, an eerie silence hung over the house. The cot in the dining room was neatly folded, Kyle's belongings gone. On the table, she found a note. Blair, I'm not worthy of you. I can't face you anymore. Please forgive me. I'll call you later. Don't try to find me. Blair stood there for a long moment, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. She felt a pang of regret, a surprising sense of loss for the unexpected connection she had shared with Kyle. But a part of her was relieved. William would be home soon, and she needed to get her life back in order. That night, Blair went to bed earlier than usual. The house felt empty without Kyle, a constant reminder of the secret life she had been leading. She was just drifting off to sleep when her phone rang. It was Britney calling to gloat, no doubt. Before Blair could even compose herself, Britney's voice burst through the speaker. Blair? If you need another assistant, you know where to find me. I can recommend someone even better than Kyle. I'm happy to help in any way I can. Then, in the background, Blair heard a familiar voice calling out. Blair? Blair? It is Kyle. Blair smiled to herself and drifted off to sleep. William's return was uneventful. He was oblivious to his wife's secret life, thrilled to be back home after months abroad. Blair, relieved that her infidelity had gone undetected, welcomed him back with open arms. A small part of Blair felt a twinge of regret, but she knew it was time to end this charade. Besides, a much bigger surprise awaited her. As William swept her off her feet that very night, Blair realized that her husband, after less than a year abroad, was a changed man. He was bolder, more experienced, more demanding. He took her on a whirlwind adventure, surpassing anything she had experienced with Chase and Kyle combined. I'll investigate this later, Blair thought to herself, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. Right now, I have more important matters to attend to. And so, we come to the end of Blair's story, a tale of loneliness, longing, and the unexpected consequences of a husband's absence. Though tempted by forbidden pleasures, Blair ultimately chose to return to the comfort and security of her marriage. Thank you for listening. Until next time.